Hi, my name's Duncan Brown, and I'm co-founder of BFB Labs, a youth mental health tech company. 1 billion of the world's population is affected by poor mental health, and half of mental disorders start by the age of 14. The tragedy is that 75% of those children won't get support because existing face-to-face services can't cope. This presents a significant commercial opportunity for digital interventions that don't rely on face-to-face delivery models. At BFB Labs, we combine immersive gaming experiences with therapeutic best practice, taking it out of the clinic and making it easily accessible for children, meeting them where they are instantly and in a way that is non-stigmatizing and that drives high engagement and adhesion. We've developed a single platform capable of hosting multiple digital therapeutics and producing real-time data and reporting. Our first intervention is Luminova, which has now been sold to 20 NHS regions in the UK. We have a second product in R&D with the opportunity to continue to add more interventions that we and others develop. Our first intervention, Luminova, Tales of Courage, is a therapeutic mobile game app which enables children aged 7 to 12 to learn to self-manage their fears and worries. It does this by providing instant access to exposure therapy, the active ingredient in cognitive behavioral therapy. Luminova has recently been recommended by NICE as one of the first-line treatment options for anxiety disorders in children and is CE marked and a Class 1 medical device. We estimate a total addressable market of £1.6 billion in other English-speaking markets with similar prevalence to the UK. We sell annual licenses to healthcare buyers like the NHS, which means families get access to our products for free. There are 160 of these buyers in the UK alone, each with a contract value of up to £250,000 per annum, durations of up to 5 years, and renewal rates of greater than 50%. Since our product launch in September 2020, we've agreed 20 contracts to the total value of £1.3 million. There are a number of legacy participants in the market which act as digital portals to face-to-face therapies. Our main competition, as we see it, are the newer market entrants like Mightier and Endeavour. Unlike us, neither provide real-time data analysis and both require clinical supervision, which we don't. We think VR is really interesting, but it's expensive and it's hard to scale. We are raising a final seed round of £2 million at a £5 million pre-money valuation to grow our market share in the UK and build our internationalization strategy ready for our Series A in 2025. The team is led by my co-founder, Manjul Rathi, who has deep expertise in digital product design and development and many years' experience as an entrepreneur, having founded previous health ventures. She's supported by an all-female senior management team. We have an extensive network of partners across academia and the clinical world, particularly the NHS, who have provided £1.5 million in non-dilutive funding to date for product development and academic studies. So that's us, BFB Labs. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Perfect. Joe's right in there with the first question, followed by Rod.
Hi, Duncan. Congrats on everything you've done so far. Super important issue. I think about my 12 and 10-year-old children on this and see how powerful the non-health commercial games are and how, immersive, and they absolutely suck them in. You're up against some pretty stiff competition on that. How are you ever going to beat them and persuade? Is it down to the parents to mandate it, or what's your experience?
So we've exactly taken that approach. So we took a game first approach to this. We feel like the digital market so far has taken a clinical approach and veneered things with games. And we've said, exactly for the point you're making, we need to make first and foremost a game that a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old really loves playing. And then we need to embed some of these therapeutic elements in it. So we are taking that head on in lots of ways, in that we think we're replicating all of those best bits of the games that your children are addicted to actually to get them into this game such that they then are taking on the therapeutic elements. They're not hidden. They know they're going through their exposure ladder, so they are overcoming their fears. They know they're doing that. And we also are careful to limit their gameplay to 40 minutes a day so that they don't overplay this. And the parent does play a role as what we describe as a co-pilot. But it's exactly what you described, which is the approach we're taking.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and then Sarah.
Mine was going to be about your planned go-to-market strategy. So, you talk very much as this being an NHS-led piece of work. Now, we know there are significant bottlenecks in providing mental health services to children, and the cohort that has mental health issues that they just do not know they have mental health issues. How do they get into that pathway? So, are you looking at this being an NHS-led initiative through referrals, or are you looking at being other routes to market to be able to target children?
So yeah, it's a really important question, because we don't want to get caught in the same bottleneck of a triage and referral. So whilst this is purchased by the NHS, we're now looking and selling like whole region models or whole area models where the trust will buy access for everyone in their catchment, and then it's made available through primarily actually through the MHST teams in schools, such that when anxiety is first being picked up, and as children are starting to enter the process of being triaged, assessed, referred, they can be provided access to this. It can also be provided as an adjunct to therapy, so we think it's got use case across the care pathway, but it's really important that this is available as a first line product, which doesn't need clinical support for it to be implemented or delivered to young people.
Thanks, Duncan. Next up, Sarah. I'm conscious of the time, so we make sure that the questions and answers are relatively short. That would be great.
Okay. Yes, this was just related to, you said that your competition needed clinical supervision, but we don't. I just wonder if you could expand on why, please.
Why we don't need it. So we've deliberately designed a game that needs very little support other than a young person to be supported to be in it for the first time, because that's the way they can stay in and engage with the product. So it's been a design part of a fundamental part of how we've designed to be able to do that because of this bottleneck around clinical support.
Thank you. Rachel G.
Hi, Duncan. Very impressive. Just wanted to touch a bit. You talked about internationalization. Just very briefly, what markets you're looking at first, and how might you localize to those markets, if you've given any thought to that yet?
Yeah, so we are, maybe like lots of people, very interested in the US market and have started exploring that through some work with an accelerator last year in Texas. The English-speaking markets don't need much, if any, localization from a product use perspective. There is clearly quite a lot of localization needed to fit into the healthcare buying process, whether it be in the US or anywhere else. We're testing that in Australia at the moment, where we've already got exemption from their medical device equivalent regime, and are testing selling into a different healthcare regime. Clearly, there is difference in every market, and part of the next 2 years is us exploring that and being ready for a Series A, which will get us into those markets when we've fully exploited the UK.
Thanks, Duncan. Next, Megan. Oh, sorry, Rachel. My apologies.
Brill, thanks. Hey, Duncan. So my question was on go-to-market strategy as well. Is there the intention for a private sector play? So over and above funding out the NHS, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, we see other buyers, so starting in the UK, such as health insurers. So that we think there's a big purchase opportunity with some of the big health insurers to make it available to their customers. We have explored and continue to have on our horizon just a direct-to-consumer model for this. It's ready for that. We want to concentrate on healthcare buyers first, where we can get the evidence and traction for the product, and then we know that is there ready when we want to go to that. It's a very different go-to-market strategy with very different dynamics in terms of the marketing and customer acquisition required to go direct to consumer. It is an option for us, given the type of product we know is on the horizon.
Brill, thanks.
Thank you. And Megan.
Yeah, I'm curious about your the effect that this has on the patient. Obviously, you've got quite a lot of traction. You've got 20 customers. That's fantastic. It's easy for us to sort of say, oh, well, okay, so if they believe it, we will as well. But, what kind of results are they seeing for their patients, and how long do those last?
So it's a really important question, and we have sold quickly into lots of regions and are in the process of gathering lots of that data. We did an initial study which we published from our pilot phase, which shows some positive results with the young people who used it. And we're actually about to conclude another study in the east of England, which the results will be out in April, where we'll have a lot more of that hard data. We have a lot of good anecdotal data on it. We've got our own data we're analysing in terms of, we show good adhesion and sticking with the product. But we are still in the process of presenting our the clinical sort of academic stamped results on that.
That's great, Duncan. Thanks very much. Thanks to our judges for their questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith, CEO and co-founder of MedWise.ai, and our mission is to empower every clinician to do their best work with AI and search. When I was a medical doctor, I used to go on night shifts. At 2 a.m. at night, I'll be tired, hungry, haven't had dinner, and I have to see patients after patients. Oftentimes, I would struggle to find the information I need to provide the best care to patients. And out of desperation, I would just Google it. Turns out I'm not alone. 70% of clinicians use Google search during work to find information and make decisions for patients. Yet, academic journals published in JAMA have shown that 1 in 2 searches currently are abandoned. And these are due to information silos, for example, hospital intranets, SharePoint, local guidelines stored in very messy way, and sometimes just emailed as PDFs to clinicians. This means that clinicians aren't finding the right information at the right time to provide best care to patients. And in the UK, this problem is estimated to cost $5 billion per year in unwarranted variation in care. And in the US, this is estimated to cost $105 billion. So at MedWise.ai, what we've built is an AI-powered search platform designed for clinicians. So we include only trustworthy content, we integrate with local documents, and our AI-powered search try to find the most relevant answer snippets. And we've been shown by Eastern AHSN that we're saving on average 2.6 minutes per search. And in a partnership with Babylon Health, their clinicians have said that we're saving more than 10 minutes every 4 hours of clinic. And thousands of clinicians have used our product already. So we have 2 paying customers and very positive user feedback from clinicians. I was previously at Huma developing virtual wards technology, and my co-founder, Luis Tito, he was previously co-founder of Bloomsbury AI, a AI startup that Facebook bought. The most exciting bit about the company is that we're a data company. We're collecting systematically the information needs of healthcare professionals, what they search for and what they look at. And these are information and data that we can train the next generation of AI. There's a lot of hype around ChatGPT, and we're very excited to welcome Dr. Chris Kelly, who works at Google Health and have developed the MedPalm version, the healthcare version of ChatGPT, to join us because he sees that we're addressing the limitation and challenges of these models. We're raising 1.25 million, with 1 million already committed to 10x our monthly active users and any recurring revenue. So welcome any questions, and thank you for listening to me pitch.
So we're going to go straight into the questions. Rod, first of all.
Hi there. How do you determine the clinical assurance on the different types of content? How do you determine which content sources you use and don't?
Yeah, so we have 2 versions of the product. The first version is a free to use version for clinicians. We have in-house clinicians that with a review process to make sure all the content are from the right publication body like NICE, Assign, etc., that they are peer-reviewed, published by, written by clinicians, and are up to date. When we work with our partner organizations, they decide what content they put on our platform. So it's not one search engine, it's a search platform that they can customize to their needs, to their content sources.
Okay.
Thank you. Rachel G next.
Hi, Keith. I was just wondering if you won, what would be your plan for engaging with Chelsea and Westminster?
Yeah, we would love to work with Chelsea and Westminster. I think first of all, we always try to understand the needs and the challenges first, and what are the biggest pain points, and then we can tailor the search platform to address those pain points. So we can very quickly, within a week, kind of build a demo product already for Chelsea and Westminster, and then iterate and co-create.
Thank you. Sarah Nelson and then Joe Stringer. And I might just remind the judges just to briefly introduce themselves.
Sarah Nelson, Programme Director at Digital Health London. Just catching up with you, Keith, and asking about your data. You talked about collecting data on needs and things. What are your intentions with that data, and what do you do with it, both for the locality and also anything larger?
Yeah, so currently there are two use cases. So first of all, with the ICSs that we've already partnered, they are able to, at an aggregated, anonymized level, understand what searches are being done and what are the gaps in terms of local guidelines. So for example, they see certain searches are not resulting in clicks, and they are missing a local guideline. They can then write those up to fill those information gaps and improve the adoption of best practice. At a kind of like federated level, we as a company are able to use these data across multiple organizations to continuously train and improve our AI. So with more organizations, everyone benefits.
Thank you. I think, was it Joe next?
Hi, Keith. Joe Stringer from Octopus Ventures. It sounds like a really basic question, but how do you, because your health is 10 to 15% of all Google searches, but obviously a huge number of those are consumer. How are you going to police whether they're actually a clinician using the service or a consumer just looking for more authoritative content?
That's a great question. So we've recently implemented NHS single sign-on, and we're seeing clinicians just using their NHS.net, and we will be making sure that all the users are clinicians.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think Megan and then Rachel M.
A couple of short ones from me. Keith, you know me already, but I'm the Director of Digital Innovation at Oxford University Hospitals. Interested in how you keep this up to date and how you manage your content, because obviously if you've got a review process, that obviously adds effort for you, whereas the advantage of Google is that there's millions of people all over the world attempting to kind of update it for you for free. How do you manage that?
Yeah, great question. So on the review process, what we review is the source of the information, not the content of the information. So for example, we've looked at NICE guidelines. Yeah, it should be good and reputable and trusted. So once we've decided NICE guideline is good enough for the search, we integrate it, and then everything is just automated. So our search engine will then go and index and make sure every new content on NICE guidelines automatically is reflected on our search. So that's on the web side of things. On the local documents, we work with the organization to understand their current workflow, how they're already updating their local documents, and we integrate with their hosting solution. There are plans to further develop in this area so that we become the offering platform. So that it also increases the defensibility such that the local guidelines are, for example, written not in a Word, not in PDF, but on a kind of Notion for healthcare organization type solutions that we built and are fully integrated with the search as well.
So my other question, if I'm allowed, John, is just around the regulatory aspects and how much do you take responsibility for what the clinicians do with the information they get from you?
Yeah, so we are a informational tool. I think what we are looking at is the baseline. 70% clinicians are just Googling, and Google won't assume responsibility if a clinician decides to use that information and something goes wrong. So the liability is on the clinician. We have a letter from MHRA confirming that we're not a medical device, and we're also adhering to DTEC. So we're already on the relevant procurement framework and the relevant regulatory frameworks.
Thanks, Keith. Rachel M. and then Chris.
Brill, thanks. Keith, Just a quick question with regards to some of the information that you've shared there. So the sheer volume of clinicians that are using Google to search, that's second nature, whether rightly or wrongly. How are you going to land something new in that space?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we've already done it. So we have GPs basically searching 10, 15 times on our search instead of going to Google. And the way we do it is to have a very simple interface that when clinicians go to our website, they immediately understand what it is. It's a search. And when we partner with organizations, we can do further integration. So for example, with SNE-ICS, we've integrated with System One. In one click in System One, they can get to our site. We're also setting up desktop icons to be more fully integrated with the workflow as well.
But sorry, can I just ask a really quick follow on there? How are they going to hear about you in the first place? You're going to have to market the backside out of this for them to be aware of you. That's my point. Rather, if they know your website, then they're going to rock up. But how are they, that power of that marketing? That was my question. Sorry, I phrased it badly.
Yeah, so currently we have some word of mouth. So GPs using it, liking it, referring it to colleagues. The other side is when we work with the ICSs, the partner organizations, we leverage their comms network, their email, to then get to the clinicians. We also do onboarding during education events so that we would present to a whole kind of 30 GP practices within a CCG footprint, for example.
Well, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Chris Sawyer.
Yeah, Chris Sawyer, Innovation Lead for Digital Health from Innovate UK. Good to see you. Yeah, quick question on business. What are your plans to grow the business? I know it's relatively early days yet. I think you formed in 2019, but just kind of a general business question.
Yeah, so we're currently raising a 1.25 million round. Use of funds mainly is to build out the sales and marketing function, which we currently is just myself. So we'll be talking to more NHS organizations, tailoring the search platform to their needs. And in the future, after the next fundraise, probably a 4 to 5 million pre-seed pre-A or C+ round to look at expansion into the US. So we already have US investors such as Startup Health, which is one of the leading digital health accelerators, and we're looking to we've applied to the Texas Medical Center accelerator as well, and hoping to start exploring the US market.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. I think Rachel wants to come in with one more question.
Hi, Keith. Sorry, just one final thought. How do you monetize it? So what's the sort of, is it a subscription or who pays for it?
Yeah, currently is a license fee, kind of B2B SaaS fee per organization. So it's 50K per year. For private organization, that will be higher. So with the license comes with unlimited number of users and searches.
That's great. Keith, I've just got one more question, and I think you've probably answered already, but if I can just ask the question again. What's your unique, defendable USP as a company?
Yeah, so there are, in terms of long-term defensibility, there are two things. So one is the data that we're already getting thousands of queries in. So these are data that we can further train and improve the AI behind the search. And we're also integrating with the workflow, with the documents. So similar to how EHR companies, once they're integrated and have patient data with an organization, it's difficult to switch or there's a huge switching cost. By integrating more with the documents and the content and the workflow, that's the other defensibility we have.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering the judges' questions. I'm going to hand you back to Neil, and thank you so much for your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honor to speak to everyone today. My name is Ernest. I'm Medical Director at Euphonia, an ophthalmologist by background. So I think, as we're all aware, health systems everywhere are facing enormous workforce pressures. So staff are burnt out, and we're struggling to address ever-increasing demands on services. However, I think the key insight for us is that whilst healthcare is incredibly complex, across any given pathway, there are many highly skilled healthcare professionals spending a lot of time having the same conversations day in and day out. For example, for phone calls after a routine, uncomplicated operation. So the question really is, can we use some of the latest AI and natural language processing technologies to automate some of these routine clinical conversations? And at Euphonia, our mission is to do just that. So I'd like to introduce to you Dora. Dora is our UKCA marked clinical conversational assistant. It's capable of having a two-way voice medical conversation over the telephone for an increasing number of routine clinical interactions. The key for patients is it's designed to be accessible, and so there's no apps or training or even a mobile phone required. And for patients, the experience is as simple as picking up the phone and speaking to a doctor or a nurse. And by doing this, we believe we can free up healthcare professional time to deliver high value care, thus alleviating the workforce shortage and reducing costs for trusts. Now, of course, you'll all rightly probably ask and be wondering, is it safe? And do patients even like this? Well, the answers are yes, it is. And yes, they do. So with regards to safety, we are UKCA marked medical device. And we have recently also been awarded an NIHR AI and Health and Care Phase 2 award. And we're now publishing data from that study and from various real world deployments at international meetings. Most recently have also published in the Nature journal I. Most importantly, around acceptability, because we meet patients where they are, we're finding an average net promoter score from patients of 9 out of 10. This is pretty remarkable considering our patient cohort has an average age of 75, up to actually 96, 98 in some of our studies. And we're doing this whilst automating up to 60% of routine clinical conversations, which more than doubles nurse capacity in any given pathway. So where we are now is we're rapidly rolling out across the UK with contracts of nearly 10% of all NHS ophthalmology sites. With, as mentioned, also recently closed a seed round with US and UK investors in August last year. We're looking to extend now Dora beyond follow-up across pathways for things like preoperative assessment and collecting patient-reported outcome measures. Beyond cataract surgery, we're also supporting our other pathways like MSK, ENT, and gynecology. So we believe we're using AI to meet the demands of modern healthcare. And I'm very much looking forward to answering your questions about some of the exciting work we're doing. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go straight to questions from the judges. Rachel Grimaldi, first of all, and then Rod Joyce.
Thank you. Hi, Ernest. I'm Rachel Grimaldi. I'm co-founder and CEO of CardMedic, an NHS anaesthetist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and I won Rewired last year. So that's so I just had a question around, you mentioned accessibility. What have you done to address accessibility in your solution? For example, if someone has a communication barrier, maybe a hearing impairment, or someone maybe doesn't speak English as a first language, those sorts of barriers. I just wondered what you've done to help overcome those communication barriers, which can lead to health inequalities for that group of patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on question and something we're working very hard on. So obviously the promise and the principle is, it's a phone call and therefore more accessible for, say, the digitally disenfranchised. In principle, we're bringing kind of, fancy AI technologies through an accessible medium. But you're right, that medium is not equally accessible to everyone. And so I think you mentioned a few things. So firstly, there's around people with kind of hearing impairments and things like that. So actually right now we're planning a focus group with 6 people with various kinds of hearing type impairments who have difficulties over the phone. Anecdotally, we've done phone calls with patients with hearing aids and it seems to perform very well. But that's something we need to kind of really engage quite directly with people who have concerns engaging on the phone, make sure we're not disadvantaging them. Very broadly, the kind of what we tell clinicians is it's suitable for anyone who would be suitable for a kind of nurse and doctor-led phone call. And at the moment, it is in English. In terms of accents, we've actually been working with academics at the University of Edinburgh, who it's a recognized thing that speech recognition systems that we also use have some issues of detecting certain accents, even within UK accents. And so that's something we're kind of capturing and working on. I think encouragingly, one of our trials, which was in Imperial, where up to, I think, 40% of the cohort was non-Caucasian. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that they all have accented English, but we have pretty good kind of anecdotal and qualitative evidence that it's pretty robust to various kind of different non-English accents. And then finally, on the kind of multilingual side, technically, we've got kind of different languages working in development, but we're having to think quite carefully around putting a governance structure around, say, can we use the base language model in a different language? And so we've got a research study with actually a team in Holland using the Dutch version of the conversation. And we just need to think carefully about, if we've got a whole new language, how do we make sure that what the system's saying, is culturally appropriate, is actually picking up different ways someone, for example, might express pain. So these are all things that I think we're working on, but yeah, so far I think it's relatively encouraging, at least for things like accents.
That's great, Ernest. Long answer. If you keep it a little bit shorter.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Rod next.
Hi, Ernest. Rod Joyce, Deputy Director of Innovation, NHS England. Do you not see the telephony version as complementary to a digital solution, or do you see it as a standalone solution? I'm just thinking more about when you get into new pathways and scaling, there are digitally savvy people who not only want to interact in that way, but also we're moving towards, the passive recording through consumer grade wearables, naturally passing and flowing data from myself and my wearables to that sort of clinical data. Do you not see that as a limiting step, particularly when you're going into what is quite a mature pre-op and proms market?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, especially on proms. What we find is, whilst the completion rates for us may be higher, for example, it can feel quite like a lengthy discussion, if you can imagine doing like a hip prom or something. Now, I think the principle we kind of strive to is at the core, healthcare is about conversations. And, you can have the quickest algorithm to, say, pick up a node on a CT scan. But actually, at the end of the day, it does come down to someone, picking up the phone and explaining the results to someone, and then being able to have a two-way conversation. And that's something I think the apps and the interfaces struggle to do. Actually, we sort of see it as sort of almost the other way around, where we sometimes, for example, have found that in pathways where patients aren't expecting a DORA call, we've developed, for example, a SMS solution to text patients who have a mobile phone to let them know about the call coming in advance. So, we're certainly open to other channels of engaging patients, but so far we found, especially, as I mentioned in the elderly cohort, it's getting quite, relatively higher completion rates versus emails or other kind of web type forms for very similar, proms equivalent examples, for example.
Thanks, Ernest. Sarah and then Rachel.
Quick question from me on user experience. You say that you're able to automate about 60%. What happens in the user journey if they're using it and actually it can't understand, it can't work? What happens to the patient at the end of it?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So the principle is DORA is really good at picking up people with no concerns or very simple concerns that DORA is able to address. So if they've got no symptoms after, for example, cataract surgery, and they've got questions like when can I drive again that are easily addressed, then they get passed and for example, get listed for their next eye operation. The 40% who have concerns that aren't quite addressed, or they just have symptoms, the model tends to be they get called back by a nurse in 48 hours. And so it's really important when we onboard patients to let them know that they're having a DORA call, that they know that if they have symptoms that aren't fully addressed, that there is a human on the other side to explore that with them. And DORA tells them that on the call as well. So so I think that way we retain the kind of benefits of having, an AI call on time, 11 on the dot. That's a kind of quick screening thing. But on the other end of it, if someone just wants to have a more nuanced discussion, they can have that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Rachel, then Chris.
Ernest, a statement really rather than a question. I'm neurodiverse, so I find it really difficult to follow without some sort of visual prompt on. So that's just in way of feedback. I just wanted to say that I understand what you've talked about. You're clearly a smart guy. And you know the questions and the conversation, but for me, I just find it very tricky to tie that back. So I just wanted to pass that back as a bit of feedback. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Sawyer, Innovation Lead for Digital Health from Innovate UK. So I've seen the kind of technology in use, so I really like it. Quick question on what are your expansion plans and what are your biggest challenges?
Yeah, so I think expansion plans I mentioned is one of our aspirations is to start capturing across clinical pathways. So, for example, cataract follow-up, doing then the moment you get referred, you have a kind of meet and greet welcome type call. Make sure you understand why you're referred, and then all the way through the other side. So that's one element of that. So in the UK, capturing more of the pathway, doing obviously more complex interactions at different time points. So I mentioned ENT. That's something actually we're looking into whether we can use Dora to do cancer head and neck triage. There's actually a very well validated kind of screening questionnaire developed by ENT UK. So we're exploring if we can use Dora to administer that rather than have consultants and experienced registrars do that. And then kind of the kind of wider plan is we are looking at markets like the US where they face similar workforce crises. I think the kind of US challenge will be number one around regulation and all that entails, but number two around understanding the kind of routes to reimbursement. So with AI devices as a whole, but certainly with something like this, that's quite an evolving field, and understanding where we fit in terms of reimbursement codes and how the different medical bodies view what we do, I think is something that we're working on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a potential issue with being maybe pulled in too many different directions?
Yeah, certainly. So we often go into clinicians and they tell us we've got this perfect use case. I do this clinic once a month. I absolutely hate it. You need to automate, the kind of Bunyan pathway or something that no one likes doing. But then what we need to do, and the thing we need to do to deliver impact, is we have to find these very high volume generalizable pathways, hence things like cataract surgery, hence things like hip and knee surgery, things that people across the UK, across the developing world would the need kind of persist. And so that's the struggle. We also kind of have quite a high bar for validating the conversations. And so in a way that kind of safeguards us against running into kind of, every use case that we're presented with. But you're right, yeah, a focus is a challenge, I think.
Because I think identifying cataract, post-cataract operation was not necessarily the most obvious area to focus on, but I think it was quite a smart move.
Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant. And it's just one question from me. What would you see as the maximum opportunity if this kind of hit all its bases and really kind of scaled out? What would you hope the impact of Euphonia could be?
So in a kind of very geeky person who likes sci-fi novels sort of way, I think in kind of 20 years, we would pick up the phone from a clinician and kind of be like, oh, it's a human. And that's because really, as we've seen in the news recently, things like ChatGPT, AI is increasingly being able to do things more consistently, more reliably in a way that, we can't do. We can't have calls at 10 p.m., for example, because there's, it's not kind of not possible to have someone on staff for that time, for example. So I think the future state for us would be to kind of exceed expectations for what conversational agents can deliver and do, and to kind of really genuinely make it the standard of care. And then the kind of the 10-year view is if we can do that really well, then we potentially could start owning care pathways and taking on the risks of managing patients, similar way that Babylon has, but really just own the whole patient journey. So yeah, those are I think the two kind of big picture
A
aspirations.
couple of nice big goals to aim for.
Yep.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ernest, for coming and sharing.
Hi, so I'm from ALOS, and we've built a novel causal AI to provide explainable medical insights to clinicians. 75% of Americans are suffering from chronic diseases. These are lifelong, debilitating, and annoyingly expensive to manage. Among chronic conditions, arthritis is the #1 cause of work disability. And the nastiest form of arthritis is inflammatory, an autoimmune condition that takes 6 GP visits before you can be referred to a rheumatologist. And what's worse is even after all of this waiting, 40% of the time you may not respond to the first line of therapy you're given. We're building a causal AI to be a clinician's co-pilot. This will save doctor time, help them make better enabled decisions, and improve patient outcomes, both at the level of diagnosis and treatment. ALOS's AI stands to tap a massively underserved market. Along with other musculoskeletal disorders, our TAM stands at 46 billion, with a £1 billion serviceable market in AI prognosis and triage. Rheumatologists assess X-ray damage to judge the efficacy of treatments they prescribe to their patients. The current practice is to simply eyeball an X-ray to gauge the extent of damage progression. As you can guess, this is not a very quantitative metric, but in research, however, quantitative metrics like the SHARP score are used to gauge joint damage. So we've prototyped a radiology AI tool that generates a SHARP score, taking X-rays as inputs. And this feeds into a larger decision-making tool that takes into account blood tests and biomarkers and maps the causal relationship between them. Today, doctors spend 30 minutes reviewing patient data. Patients are often improperly triaged or completely missed, and there are no quantitative metrics to assess damage. Our solution optimizes the end-to-end care pathway, saving 10+ hours in doctor data review time, assigning risk scores to each individual patient while triaging and quantifying disease progression. Most of all, our AI is trustworthy. Conventional machine learning models are black boxes. They predict correlations and do not draw from any medical knowledge. Our platform maps the cause-effect relationships between these variables and would judge you exactly the way a trained clinician would. We are the first movers in the inflammatory arthritis market with a unique explainable AI. We have access to proprietary datasets, to strategic collaborations, and the ability to process multimodal data. Our competitors focus on other diseases like cancer or restrict themselves to either imaging or clinical data and do not do both, and certainly not with causality. In terms of traction, we have 40,000 patients from the Hospital Authority of Hong Kong and are analyzing clinical data collected over 18 NHS sites in a collaboration with the University of Oxford. Our annual revenue is just over 130,000. Our technology also has applications in the pharmaceutical sector for clinical trials and monitoring, and towards this end, we have signed an MOU with a generics pharma company. Our advisory board has rheumatology experts from Oxford and Hong Kong, and it's well represented by clinical and technical experts. And our founding team is made up of scientists, researchers, and experts in pharma to deliver value across the proposed market. We're raising a 2 million seed round, which will be used towards a clinical trial, CE submission of our radiology tool, and 5 planned pilot tests with hospitals, and of course, to expand our team. Thank you very much if you've made it this far, and look forward to questions.
Let's go to our judges. Just remind our judges to introduce themselves briefly. I think the order we've had hands go up so far is Rod and then Rachel.
Hi, Rod Joyce, Deputy Director of Innovation, NHS England. That was a lot of information to take in. It seems really good. How much evidence are you generating through that trial in the NHS, and what is the data currently telling you? Not just around, is there clinical outcomes? Because what you're saying at the moment, it's very much around time saved for GPs and clinicians to be able to look at those things. What are the clinical outcomes for patients?
Right. So with the pilot tests that they're not exactly pilot tests, with the research project that we're doing with the University of Oxford, where they're collecting data across 18 NHS sites, we're at the data collection and analysis phase, so we haven't generated any insights from that. But with the 40,000 patient data set that we got from the Hospital Authority of Hong Kong, we have generated a few clinical outcomes. For example, in Hong Kong, the first line of therapy that's given to patients is methotrexate. And typically, rheumatoid arthritis patients are at a 50% higher risk of contracting cardiovascular disease. So it becomes very important for a doctor to know if they're giving you the right treatment without exacerbating your other comorbidities. So we determined that methotrexate, which is the first line of therapy that's given, is in fact protective against cardiovascular risk. So this improved physician confidence in recommending that as a line of treatment. So that would be a very relevant clinical outcome that we validated with already.
Sorry, myself on mute. Thanks, Aditya. Rachel next, followed by Megan.
Hi, I'm Rachel Grimaldi, co-founder and CEO of CardMedic, an NHS anaesthetist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and won Pitchfest last year. So my question, thank you. I had sort of had a few questions. So I'm going to try and kind of combine them into one, really. Reading your entry, you mentioned about raising 3.75 million for a prototype. And you've also talked about, because it was quite quick, so I don't know if I caught the exact number, but growing to, I think it was 26 million turnover in 3 years. So just wondering how you're planning on going about that raise and growing that quickly. You talked about the US market, Hong Kong, but what about the UK? And are there other diseases that you're going to be going into to help scale and grow that fast? So just trying to understand a bit more around scaling and fundraising.
Right. So there were a few questions there. I think with regard to entering the UK market, we're really relying on getting into the hill with Megan, and hopefully we can get some inputs and pilot tests from there. With regard to the other tertiary markets that we're looking at, we're working with the Hong Kong Hospital Authority, and we're also working with the Indian Council of Medical Research in India. They don't have as high regulatory standards as the UK does, so we could get some pilot data from there, which would dictate our validation studies. And if we do deploy in India and the success of our technology is demonstrated, it would bolster the confidence of the NHS to adopt a solution like this. I think your other question was around the US. So we have looked at getting regulatory approval. Our platform will be a Class 2A medical device. So we're setting up the QMS right now, and that would take about 6 to 9 months to complete, and we should be ready to to submit for regulatory approval for a radiology tool in 9 months, which would open up the US market for us. With regard to other diseases, we're building a platform that can be a clinician's co-pilot. Currently, we're focusing on chronic diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, PSA, and axSpA, which are very difficult to prognose and treat for. And we're looking to expand to other more complex autoimmune diseases, given the data and traction in this field.
Yeah, it was also around kind of scaling how you're going to grow that quickly in the next 3 years and raise 3.75 million. It seems like a lot of money to raise.
Right. So
yeah.
One thing that we've done is we've reduced our fundraise target to 2 million right now. So that's an update we've made over the last two months, given the current state of the market. And with regard to how we're going to grow that fast, our platform can also be used for pharmaceutical clinical trials management. So we've signed an MOU with a pharma company where we manage their clinical trial and do patient screening for them. And this is a co-development deal that we've entered into. So we will get a share of the license of the drug that they've developed. And this is the major contributing factor towards the 26 million figure in revenue that you saw.
Thank you. Megan, and then Joe.
Yes, thank you, Aditya, for your presentation. Obviously, you're relatively early stage, but with quite an exciting concept. I'm wondering where you see your biggest challenges. Is it in the sort of the science and the technology? Is it in the regulatory environment? Is it in that sort of marketing piece and getting to your customers, or in the kind of protectability and other companies coming in? So I wonder if you could give us an idea of where you're most confident and where you're least confident, and perhaps what your mitigations are.
So I think we're most confident in protecting our software. It's going to be protected as a trade secret. And a lot of people are focusing on AI applied as a black box to big data that exists in healthcare. Very few people are looking at causality, especially the way we're doing it, and even less so for chronic conditions. So in that sense, it's very defensible. With regard to marketing and raising awareness, we have key opinion leaders who currently are NHS rheumatologists within the Oxford University Hospitals Trust. So we're looking to them to kind of push the product from within the ecosystem and generate awareness about this. And there will be associated publications demonstrating the advantage. I think marketing would be our biggest challenge, because we're trying to push something completely novel into the NHS ecosystem. And for that, we would need the support and understand. So we've tried to conduct a health economics analysis with NHS Midlands at the moment. And they did let us know that pending a successful pilot or the offer of a pilot, they would be able to help us in greater detail, but they seem to be interested in what we're offering as well. And I don't know if there was another question that I missed.
I think you covered it pretty comprehensively.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to Joe, then Rachel, then Sarah.
Hi, Dieter. Great presentation. I'm
Thank
pleased I wasn't the only one to think there was a lot of information. So I guess question tinged with a bit of advice for what it's worth. We see a lot of AI solutions in the market. I mean, for every kind of condition. So sometimes, and irrespective of the quality of the AI, sometimes the uniqueness or the most compelling part is your go-to-market. I think go-to-market is the make or break for any solution like this. And increasingly, we're seeing a lot of aggregators of AI solutions, which make it a damn sight easier for NHS customers and a damn sight easier for you. Right. Are you looking at using any of those at the moment? And if so, which ones are you looking at?
So at the moment, the AI that we're building is actually not your standard AI. It's a causal AI model where you can identify not only the outcome, but also the cause and effect that leads to that outcome. So this opens up the landscape of interventional questions, which you will not be able to do with normal AI. So in that sense, we're not looking to integrate with any other AI service provider at the moment, because they simply don't work with the same kind of models we do, nor with the data structures that we do. But at the same time, it becomes imperative to integrate with the existing IT infrastructure of hospitals like EHRs. So for that, we're looking at the EHRs of the Hong Kong Hospital Authority so that we can plug into their 200,000 large patient data set in rheumatology. And we hope to complete this by September this year. And that probably will bolster confidence among the NHS that we can handle something like this.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Rachel and then Sarah.
Great, thanks. Hey, Dieter. Yeah, I know colleagues have said, but lots of information there. I absolutely get the ambition. Technology looks, interesting and unique. The bit that I still can't quite get my head around is not so much the money generated from the NHS and then moving into pharma. I understand that, but how are you going to play in both spaces? Because the challenge most companies have is they're serving something up into healthcare or the NHS, that's accepted. But if they're straddling pharma and NHS, that is still, that's a bit of a dark art at the minute. How are you planning on handling both sides of the challenge?
So the reason why we're doing pharma in the first place is because physicians are reluctant to participate in clinical trials at the moment. There's a wealth of healthcare data, and it's not structured in a way that physicians can understand, nor clinical trials expert can understand. So pharma companies do not work with healthcare to get this data unless you're part of a very large-scale study. So in that sense, we are using causality as a way to explain the structure that already exists within the data to foster confidence among physicians to get involved in clinical trials. So that way you can actually develop therapies for people that need it, or identify subcohorts of patients that are at most risk of a particular drug, which is the problem that we're trying to solve.
Okay, sorry, just one follow-up. So my background is more on the NHS side. So I guess I asked the question the other way around, which is that, there's a lot of skepticism from the NHS side in sharing data and information with pharma. So I ask it with that way around, really. How are you going to approach that side of it?
So our goal is not to share data. We won't be sharing data at all because patient data is private and personal, but we will be sharing insights that you generate from the model. So the causal model will learn relationships that exist between patient demographics, treatments, comorbidities. And these relationships are what you will use to condition your pharma trials. So in that sense, the data is not exactly leaving the NHS ecosystem and being shared with pharma. It's only a gateway to let them know that we've understood this much healthcare data and can possibly account for novel data that you generate during the clinical trial.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you. And Sarah.
I'm interested in the research that you're doing at the moment. What is the learning from that, which is sort of will help you to understand the current UK pathways and how you might fit in within that?
By research, do you mean scientific research or market research?
You spoke about your research, your scientific research, and that's the way that at the moment you're within the system.
Right.
So from that, have you gained any understanding with the clinicians who you're working with on the research as to how it might fit into NHS pathways?
Right. So the advisors we work with have identified two major problems. The first problem is the delay to diagnosis. It takes on average 9 months and sometimes even 8.5 years for a patient who has first had joint pain to be diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And this is a chronic disease. So by the time you're diagnosed with it, you probably lose functionality in your limbs and are not able to do the things you love. So one of the goals that we want to achieve immediately is to reduce the time taken to diagnosis or to see a secondary care physician. But if we do that, there's a lot more people who are going to be referred to secondary care, which is the second part of the problem. So we'd like to reduce the time taken to review data in secondary care from 30 minutes to just 10. And we're going to do this by automating the way you read radiographs that's collected routinely at the level of secondary care, which we've proved and demonstrated already with our partners. So that's actually a tool that works with 80% accuracy right now. So you put in an X-ray and we give you a sharp score ready to go. And that information can actually be used as part of a larger decision-making tool, which would take into account your blood tests, biomarkers, and genetic information, which is information that we plan to collect to give you a holistic risk score on what treatments you can actually prescribe the treatment. So prescribe the patient. So the product, let me just break it down. The product proceeds in 3 stages. The first would be at the level of primary care, and then in secondary care, where you would look at radiology and also blood tests and biomarkers.
Brilliant. Aditya, we are out of time. Thanks so much for your presentation.
Good afternoon. This is a picture of my daughter, Clementine. Like 70% of babies, she developed newborn jaundice. Like 5% of babies, this was severe jaundice, which required intensive hospital treatment. Her diagnosis and treatment was delayed because expertise and equipment are centralized in hospitals. Yet, most mums and babies are discharged within 24 hours of birth. This delay put Clementine at risk of becoming up to 1% of babies who suffer long-term health problems or even death. It's completely unacceptable for an easily treatable condition in 2022. Our experience was not unique. The CQC survey found that 40% of mums are unable to access postnatal care at home. So HERA will bring expert care into the palm of your hand, and with our advanced jaundice diagnostics, it will replace inaccurate visual assessment and expensive testing devices as the first step in jaundice diagnosis, allowing every baby to be screened reliably, conveniently, and cheaply. The jaundice technology is called neo-SCB, and uniquely it's based on eye yellowing and was invented by one of our founders at UCL. It was proven in 2 large studies to be as good as the hospital-based standard of care. So parents will have a midwife consultation at a convenient time, screening for jaundice and addressing any other problems. Most babies, including with mild jaundice, are screened out and don't need hospital care. For those that do, we catch the problem earlier and avoid harm. By reducing costs while increasing access to quality care, HERA can truly democratize and revolutionize postnatal care around the world.
We will launch in the UK, where we are targeting roughly a £40 million market. Our goal is to have the whole NHS using HERA as a SaaS platform for community midwife care. Whilst we are working towards NICE HTA, we will launch in 3 other markets: private self-pay, private insurance, and employer benefits. These markets will generate both the additional data and credibility needed for a wide NHS adoption. To achieve this vision, we are currently running our first round of pre-seed funding of £1 million. We will use this to finalize the technology, run a clinical trial in the UK, and get regulatory approval in the UK, all before 2024. Our team is amazing. Tom was an associate professor of medicine at UCL, joined McKinsey, scaled and exited a leading biotech. I am an engineer with an INSEAD MBA, became a life sciences team leader at McKinsey. Terence is the inventor of the neo-SCB jaundice technology at UCL. And Joe is a designer, mentor at St. Martin's, and leader in McKinsey, specializing in developing digital applications within healthcare. We all have children and feel a deep purpose to bring this to market. Thank you.
Who would like to go first with questions? If you could raise your hands. a sea of hands and suddenly gone up, or a forest of hands. Megan, followed by Rachel M, then Joe.
Hello, I'm Megan Morris-Carter of the Hill, Director of Digital Innovation for Oxford University Hospitals. I'm interested in kind of what happens after you've done this diagnosis, because if the care is not generally given at home, do these people then go back into the hospital? How do you connect with the hospital systems to kind of give them that information?
Great question. So the way that it happens at the moment, or at least in theory it should happen, is that a midwife will come to the home routinely at day 5. They will decide if the baby looks jaundiced visually. Now, we know this is hugely inaccurate, but based on that, they'll then refer anyone who is yellow to the hospital to go and have this next step, which is a transcutaneous bilirubinometer. Now, many of those babies don't need hospital care. They just need the hospital assessment and then are sent home again. What we intend to do is an earlier at-home diagnosis. Now, if you take the group of, well, there were 30% of babies who don't have any jaundice. They're fine. Then there's another 70% of babies who do have jaundice, of which 65% of the total have non-severe jaundice. Now, we can basically screen out almost all of those and say, our test is reliable, sensitivity and specificity is as good as the standard of care. You don't need any further assessment. Now, there's still advice that you can, the reason for having a midwife in the loop is because there's still advice and sort of some subjectivity to this. But you can do things like increased feeding advice, increased exposure to light, even as a home remedy can help with this. But you will also then get those that have severe jaundice and get them much earlier. And so that has a few factors. Firstly, obviously, it reduces the potential for harm, because the higher the level for the longer, the higher the level of your bilirubin for longer, the more risk of harm. But you can also de-escalate treatment. So babies that would have needed, for instance, the most severe care, which is an exchange transfusion in hospital, and it's as bad as it sounds, in intensive care. If you get it earlier, then they can have the next level down, which is phototherapy, light therapy, which is still, not very pleasant, but is much safer than the top level of treatment.
And maybe just to add to that, the long-term vision, we would love to be connected to the electronic health record.
Yeah.
That's the long-term vision. I don't think it's in the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very wise, I would say. Not being the MVP.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of this is that this is really we're starting in a discrete time period, the first few days of life. So actually it can function as its own sort of entity before rolling into other areas potentially.
Brilliant, thank you. Moving on to Rachel Murphy and then Joe.
Thanks. So Rachel Murphy, health entrepreneur. So a couple of things. Firstly, I really like the deep purpose aspect. So, it's coming from a really good place in way of the approach that you're taking. I'd probably caution against trying to secure the whole of the NHS, because that's a miracle that none of us will ever manage to achieve. But I understand the sentiment. My question was again linked to how are you feeding that data back in? So I get the electronic health record piece going forward, but are you saying that your app will allow somebody to ascertain, are they in that 65% of the 70, and therefore are they safe, and they will then report that to the midwife when she or he rocks up a couple of days later, and that's the end of that? Is that how that's going to work?
Yeah, so actually there's a few different facets to that. So once we are, so the long-term vision is to be a SaaS platform within the NHS. So that will be NHS midwives using the platform. Now, there are steps, and we will have to iterate a little bit. We will initially launch in the private self-pay market, just because that's the easiest one to access fastest. In that case, then yes, this would be an adjunct to the NHS community midwife. Now, I should also add actually that the NHS community midwife services at the moment do actually function, even though they probably shouldn't, as quite a discrete entity. So the only communication that happens between hospital and the NHS community midwife services is the red book that you're given, and you as parents sort of that follows you round. So it's basically, currently it will be similar sort of process to what happens in the patient pathway. As Sarah mentioned, long term, we would want that to be fully integrated.
Brill, thanks.
Thank you. Joe.
Hi guys, thanks so much for the presentation. Joe Stringer from Octopus Ventures. Being a VC, I echo Rachel's point about your purpose, and I really hope you guys nail this from a sort of societal perspective. But from an investment perspective, you started to answer the question, which is, it's hard to justify an investment for, providing a point solution for 3 days from a sort of straight to consumer perspective. I thought initially you were sort of, targeting millions of worried mums, but it sounds like you've answered the question about being a SaaS play for midwifery, but that is a relatively discrete market. Where else could you take this? Could the technology be used in other guises? If not, what's your plan about internationalization?
Great question. So unfortunately, because of the 3 minutes, we didn't have time to cover that. But where we play at the moment is a $750 million market. That's the jaundice technology. Now that actually can probably be expanded as well as a market by moving into the prevention, sort of taking some of the sort of market that would be sort of treatment as well. Much bigger than that is the wider sort of maternity market, and that can include postnatal care. It can include and actually start to roll into pediatric care. There's about a 40 billion market for connected care in pediatrics. So we feel that the most sort of relevant synergies are to move into antenatal care and then move into pediatric care as well. But actually, there is the opportunity for this to become a much greater platform. In fact, our inventor, Terence at UCL, has a pipeline of other optical technologies that can go into this platform, and that can include things like anemia care as well.
Oh, interesting.
Diagnosis and care.
Okay, thank you.
And then in terms of internationalization, just to answer the internationalization question, we're looking at the US, where there are already reimbursement codes that could be used for this type of technology. And obviously the US has many heterogeneous subsystems, and for some of them we would be able to add value, for others not. We were looking at Europe as well, but Europe doesn't have early discharge as the US and the UK do. So there the value proposition would be less relevant, although there are initiatives to have earlier discharge with a very close follow-up in the homes. Like Prado is an initiative in France. Okay. But it typically would be something, but more on the longer term. And then we were also looking at other options like Africa, India, Southeast Asia, where actually the unmet need is much bigger than in the UK. And there are some pockets of the population that actually would be able to pay for it out of pocket. So again, longer term, but it's something that we are thinking about too.
The clock is against us. If we could keep moving through questions, Rachel and then Sarah and Rod.
Hi, I'm Rachel Grimaldi. I'm co-founder and CEO of CardMedic, an NHS anaesthetist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and last year won Pitchfest. I just love the vision. I love the idea. I've got 4 children, 3 of whom were jaundiced after birth, so matches with your stats nicely. One of them had the transcutaneous and the heel prick as well. The others just had the heel pricks. So I just wondered a bit around, you talked about launching a self-pay market, parents safe to use this themselves. Obviously, you can get kind of physiological and pathological jaundice. How would the average person know they could check on day 1 and think it's all fine, and then not think to worry on day 7 or something when it appeared, or day 10 and the baby was still yellow? So how would you train parents to use this properly, and have you involved them in development or midwives in development? What's your kind of vision around that?
So actually, we should probably add, I probably wasn't clear there. When we were talking about launching in the self-pay market, that was still with a midwife in the loop. So we would have a remote consultation with a midwife as part of that, but it would just be in the private self-pay market. And the reason for doing that, and perhaps Sarah, you can elaborate on some of the market research we've done so far, but the reason for doing that is simply, the time scale. We can launch that product reasonably quickly, whereas to get wider NHS adoption beyond our pilot sites, we would be looking at a nice HTA, which obviously takes a couple of years. Sarah, perhaps you can discuss the market research that we did.
Yeah, actually, we ran a survey where basically there were like 35% of parents who were willing to pay out of pocket up to around £50 to increase the touch points right after birth. But there were also 15% of parents who said, look, we were totally lost. We would have paid anything to get more touch points. We felt totally not taken care of and scared.
Thank you, Sarah. And very quickly, we've literally got 2 minutes left. Rod and then Chris.
Sorry, wrong button. Hi, Rod Joyce, Deputy Director of Innovation, NHS England. My question, I think it was answered, but I'll phrase it another way. Who are you looking to partner with? Anybody who's already active in your pathways to be able to help? As a buyer, I look at, I get hundreds of people saying, well, I've got the best solution for this, and then this, and then all individual siloed products. How are you looking to sort of go to market with a partnership offer that says we work alongside, I don't know the market well enough, eRed Book plus this, plus that, to come together and say, as a CIO, I can go, great, I have the best pathway I can offer because I've got a combination of products that work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we're sort of focusing really on the UK here, we'll be running this. Well, we have a pilot site, which is UCL already. We've already done research at UCL. That was the initial study, which was a 50-patient study coming out of there. We'll work with that site. We also want to secure at least one other site as part of the clinical trial / pilot study. As part of that, it will be a little bit of a custom solution because there is sort of heterogeneity in the systems that are used. Obviously, some NHS trusts and various different sort of bodies, community midwives, use EHR, they may use Epic, they may use a different system. So there is a little bit of having to sort of find the best solution for them. As we build the product, we obviously want to make sure it's compatible with all the relevant standards with FHIR, etc., so that we can tailor it to each customer a little bit. Obviously, we don't want to be building an entirely unique solution for each customer, but it can tweak and fit in with their own pathway. And that's, we also say that in terms of the our delivery model is that if we think the best solution for the majority of NHS trusts would be a SaaS platform. However, if they need surge capacity in terms of their community midwives, we can also bring that in. We effectively have a bank of our own staff that can run some of these appointments.
Tom, I just want to give Chris a chance to ask this question, and then we are out of time.
Yeah, mine will be very quickly. Chris Sawyer, Innovation Lead for Digital Health Innovate UK. What's your pricing model?
So we think we can run this to around, less than £30 per consultation. And that will include royalty fees to UCL, midwife. And I should add, that's when we are supplying the midwife ourselves and that the midwife care. That includes midwife wages, etc. When we're running at a SaaS platform, it's far, far cheaper than that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom and Sarah.